Hey, I felt like it was worth doing an update here. I'm looking at the official blog news post for what's been announced about gearing. So some of the stuff isn't that old to people who are already used to looking at the PTS and some of the stuff that's coming out, but it's definitely not new to you either. So let's go over a little bit about what Star Wars is saying about how they're going to be doing gearing for 7.0 and what the plan is. So what they're doing is they're kind of looking at giving you the majority of your gear as a very linear progression. So when we look at current gear, we have gear that's moddable and gear that's not. So when you think about getting to max 306 gear, your Onderonian gear has fixed stats and you don't swap out any of the components in it. That is kind of what they're aiming to be the main gearing progression for people as they go through gearing in 7.0. So that's really what they're aiming to do, is trying to give you this process of you just look at one individual piece out of your set and you want to keep bumping up that item rating. There's a few things that they're going to be doing. They're going to change how the item rating drops are depending on your level. So when you're level 76 to 79, I believe, is 76, 79, you're going to be capped on kind of the item rating that it's kind of willing to give to you. And then once you hit 80, it's actually going to bump you up. So once a player reaches level 80, the base progression gear rewarded will be item rating 320, whereas from 75 to 79, you'll get 308 to 318 gear. So that's a really interesting kind of odd thing that I wasn't expecting, is they're going to say, once you hit level 80, we're going to guarantee you're going to be getting 320 gear and higher. Now, it's kind of weird to say you're getting higher gear. So they've got this kind of weird thing going on where they're going to look at gear as being upgradable. So technically you still get gear, but the general idea is they want you to be upgrading existing gear. They don't really want you to be saying, oh, I just found gear with higher stats and now I'm going to swap it out. They want you to say, here's your gear and just keep upgrading it, make it more powerful without having to swap it. So yes and no, that's easier. It's, the removal of looking after all the modifications. I ignored that anyways in 6.0. I just looked at whatever had the highest item rating as a single piece. I didn't bother swapping out mods, enhancements, and armorings because it just wasn't worth the time and effort when you're power leveling your item rating of your gear. So there's going to be a few different upgrade paths that are available to you about the base gear. So the first thing we want to illustrate is you can get a way where you get rewarded with an item, I assume it sounds like an item, that guarantees to upgrade your lowest item rating. So the general idea is they're saying you're going to get a guaranteed upgrade every so often while playing content, and that guaranteed upgrade will look at your lowest item rating and boost that up a little bit. So your item rating overall is always going to go up. They're also going to have ways to get currency for upgrading gear, or some other upgrade item where you can select which piece of gear you want to upgrade. So there's going to be two different ways for the main part of upgrading. One is something that just automatically upgrades the lowest item rating item, and the other being something that allows you to choose what to upgrade, and that's generally going to be a little bit more complex of a system. You have to deconstruct, you have to go to a vendor, something like that. You have to have matching components. The other thing that's, I guess, that we can talk a little bit about there. So they talked about wanting to have a system that when players do reach the item rating cap, that they want you to still be able to min-max your gear and have all of those individual components you can customize. So they haven't given us clear instructions or indications on how important it's going to be, or if there's any way to get the min-max stuff outside of a vendor. Well, maybe that is clear. They've just said it's on a vendor. They haven't been clear if it's going to be introduced when 7.0 launches. That's what I meant to say. But yeah, so that's something that's going to be kind of an interesting idea. You're still going to be able to min-max. You're still going to be able to get moddable gear and swap all the components to min-max. They haven't really talked too much about how you're going to actually be able to get those items, if it's just going to be the regular currency that's used for upgrading gear, which there's going to be multiple types of currency, or if it's going to be some other system of being able to afford and get. They've got quite a few things that the details haven't been worked out, but just so you know, you're going to have this general gear, which you don't worry about the moddable bits. You just worry about the upgrade progression, either getting an upgrade token or reward that's going to guarantee upgrade your lowest item rating piece, or you're going to deconstruct / trade in. You're going to get the ability to select which pieces you want to upgrade once you have the right stuff to trade in to upgrade a specific piece rather than just your lowest piece. And then once you hit the max item cap, they're supposed to be introducing a vendor that allows you to customize, have the moddable gear and min-max like we're used to seeing right now. I haven't seen anything officially about if gear is legacy bound or how it's going to work, if you can power level all of your characters to max gear by swapping. My guess, without having done the research, is that no, we're not going to see the same ease of maxing out characters to max item rating as before when you swap between characters, but I could be completely wrong. I'm not really sure on exactly understanding what they mean about you're getting like upgrade gear or if you get like actual gear that's equipable. Yeah, so they call it reward gear. I'm not 100% sure if they mean that that's just gear that's equipable at a certain item rating. I'm not 100% clear on this, but so that's kind of the gear, and that's what we're looking at. Now, the other thing that we want to look at in terms of what they've told us about progression with the gear and the item rating, let's just side note, they've removed renown. So there's going to be no renown crates. But what they're doing is they're going to scale the gear throughout all the patches that come out after 7.0, all the majors, so 7.1, 7.2, as well as they are going to be capping the max reward depending on the difficulty of the content. So they're saying that, right off the bat, there's going to be a certain item rating that's available for the lowest and the highest that you can get. And then as they keep releasing patches, they're going to increase the item rating. So 7.1, 7.2, they want you to continue to have to grind gear. I don't know if it's actually going to be something that requires a big time sink. If you've saved up the currency and have excess from playing a lot, you might be able to just go straight up to the max level gear as soon as the next patch drops. We'll see what they choose to do. But yeah, so they're going to be increasing that, and they're not going to change the difficulty of the content. So the idea is that you're going to become more powerful as they keep releasing more patches, and the content itself won't become any harder. So it will actually become easier because your gear is becoming better. And players who are joining the expansion late, they're going to get a higher base item rating, the lowest level of item rating that's going to drop for them. So, anyone who starts playing right now at this release of 7.0, which is not out yet, of course, is going to find that they are going to be getting lower level gear than somebody who, say, joins at 7.3, just for example. Now, the other really important thing about gearing progression. So, difficulty level of the content you're playing. If you're doing veteran mode, flashpoints, they plan to cap the max item rating at, right now, the example they're giving is 326, I believe. And then they're going to also be saying that you can do item ratings through Conquest. So Conquest is supposed to be capped at 326. Master Mode Flashpoints is supposed to be capped at 328. Veteran Operations are supposed to be capped at 326 as long as they came out before 7.0. So that's a bit of a weird thing, but anything that's Duxon and earlier, 326 for veteran, and 330 if you're doing them on master mode or nightmare as most players call it. So I have to correct myself there. I just read this again. Veteran mode, they're suggesting that it's going to be item rating 324 for the cap, with master flashpoints being 326. So flashpoints are thinking 324, 326, and then conquest would be 326. So they're actually suggesting that right now Conquest with 7.0 will allow you to gear up to the same item rating as Master Flashpoints and higher than Veteran Flashpoints. PvP, they're going to make quite a few changes here. They're going to introduce a skill, a stat ceiling and a stat floor to make sure everybody's bound within a certain range. And they're suggesting item rating 326 being the max that you can get to, so same as Master Mode Flashpoints. Operations, we talked a little bit briefly about how these are going to be a bit different. Anything that came out before 7.0 will be treated a bit differently than everything after. So when we're looking at 7.0, we're looking at item rating 326 for veteran operations, which is the same as master flashpoints, And then master operations or nightmare will allow 330. So that's quite a big power jump. They're really giving an extra 4 item rating points for people who complete master mode operations compared to those people who are doing master mode flashpoint. So that's nice to see. I'm happy to see that they're going to give something nice to justify the extra challenge of playing those challenging operations. And that's kind of potentially all thrown out the window. We'll see how the new operation looks, but they say the veteran difficulty for the R4 anomaly operation will drop item rating 330, 332, and 334 gear, with the story mode dropping 328. So story mode is going to drop right in between legacy, veteran, and master mode for item rating, so it's not as good. And maybe story mode's actually going to be hard. We'll see if they've changed that tune of story mode being like, yeah, it's never hard. And the veteran difficulty, I'm surprised it just clobbers how much you can get out of the legacy operations on master mode. So we'll see if it's actually going to be harder than those. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe they've made it so hard that they're like, yeah, this is definitely harder than all the master mode content in the game, except for maybe a couple legacy operations, because obviously they're all different. They give you the same gear. So yeah, these are some pretty interesting kind of changes to the way that you progress through getting your gear and the different item ratings available. So in general, if you just want to do things that don't include operations, you're going to be capped probably at 326 item rating. It's going to be fairly easy to get there. Now, there's a few things that they've talked about how you're actually going to be able to grind up and the bonuses they give you. So they want to put a lot of focus on moving people to playing weekly rotations of content. And this is really changing a few of the things we know about how you usually enjoy the game. So they plan on resetting all weekly missions every single week, and they plan on making certain weekly missions give you a lot more bonuses than the ones that aren't on the list. So it's kind of like the galactic seasons in a sense, where they highlight a few things and say, go do these, you'll get some extra rewards. The difference though is that everything else still rewards you, just not as much of a reward. So it's going to really be interesting to see how many players choose to just make sure they're doing stuff that's focused as the weekly content because that's prioritized, or maybe people will just do it because the game kind of pushes you that way and they don't care that it's faster or better. I know some people will be a bit annoyed. There's not going to be hammer station spam potentially. What they're saying is that Activity Finder will actually select a random amount of flashpoints and story mode operations that are available, and the first 3 that you complete each week will give you a guaranteed upgrade if you need it. Otherwise, it'll give you the currency that you need for upgrading gear later. There's quite a few different gearing things. So doing weekly stuff will give you a type of currency for upgrading. Doing flashpoints will give you currency for upgrading. Doing conquests will give you currency for upgrading. Operations, I guess, will give you currency for upgrading. So there's quite a few different things. And depending on what you're doing, what difficulty you're doing, it kind of limits the max content. So sure, you can go in and you can grind out gear on flashpoints, but it's not going to be the same as before. You can't grind out max on a veteran flashpoint. They're also capping the effectiveness. So getting 1 guaranteed upgrade every single time. I felt like that's how the old system was. I really felt like the amount of loot that they gave you every time you completed a flashpoint was generally enough to guarantee at least 1 upgrade. So something always went up in item rating. Whereas with the new system, they're saying you only get 3 guaranteed item rating upgrades per week. So it's a bit of a downgrade at that point. On the flip side though, you're still earning that currency that allows you to upgrade gear. So potentially it could even itself out that if you played 30 flashpoints in a week, that you were still able to upgrade an item rating 30 times, 30 flashpoints 30 times. It's hard to say if it's going to be that way. I'm not sure exactly how the new currency is going to add up and the costs, because they haven't even figured that out themselves. So that's going to be something very different about how the gearing progression works. We'll see if it makes it better for players or not. They say they're making it better or not. And now there's quite a few other interesting things that I want to dive into on this post as well. So one of the things that I was a bit excited to see, I'm not sure how exactly it's going to work out. Maybe it'll be bad, maybe it'll be good. But they've said that when you're doing operations, they want to create tokens that provide gear at a fixed item rating, or basically saying you just completed this operation. The boss, instead of dropping those random pieces of set bonus gear that they used to do, it's now going to say, here's a token, go get yourself an item rating 328 or whatever. And you can trade that around with your group. So basically the idea being that you can help other people quickly gear up to much higher item rating by doing operations and getting these tokens and sending them to that person. So if you've got, a raid team where pretty much everybody's already maxed out except a couple players, you could be passing these tokens to the players who need to upgrade. Or if you've got a friend, and you can bring them along. They've only suggested this being in operations. They haven't suggested this being anywhere else in the game. So I think it's meant to kind of push the raiding community to try and bring people in more. I'm not sure. It's interesting. It could prove to be something that adds some nice interest back into raiding outside of the current communities. The other thing that I want to go over is the removal of amplifiers. So amplifiers are getting removed. That's a interesting choice because it is supposed to be a credit sink in the game. I'm not sure what they're going to do to maintain, obviously they don't have many credit sinks, so does it really matter to have credit sinks if your bathtub's already overflowing? No, it doesn't. Or if your whole house is underwater? No, it doesn't. So whatever, but they're removing amplifiers. They say that apparently players didn't gain value from the amplifier system. I disagree with that, but whatever. That's their choice to remove the amplifier system. They have said, though, for the time being, they are going to be allowing us to continue using the current augment system. They haven't specifically said if they're going to remove it at some point, but it almost sounds like they're thinking about the idea of removing the augment system. But right now, all the current augments are going to stay. They've said nothing about new augments at the next level, unless I missed something on the PTS, because I haven't really been following all the details. So we'll see how that turns out. One other thing that I have seen mentioned a few times in some of the other posts is legendary items. And that's basically what they're doing. Instead of having set bonuses like we're used to having, where it says based on having 2, 4, or even 6 pieces equipped, you get these different bonuses. They're now going to give you 2 legendary items you can equip. One is supposed to be more combat focused, while the other one's more utility focused. And those will have your bonuses, your equivalent of set bonuses. I believe tacticals are still going to be in the game. I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen there. But yeah, these new legendaries, they're going to basically be, you have 2 items that you can swap in and out depending on what bonuses you want, and you're just going to upgrade these like all the other gear. So you increase their item rating by upgrading them, same as we've been talking about for the majority of this video on how you upgrade to a higher item rating. So yeah, this is a lot of interesting things they've put in here other than just telling us about gear. They've talked about a little bit more about limiting the activity finder and the push towards getting to do weekly content and the different routes that you have. They say you can completely grind up loot doing flashpoints, conquest, PvP, operations, just doing one of those without having to mix them all. Oh, and of course weeklies. They mentioned that somewhere in here. The general thing that you want to know about how to prepare for grindy in 7.0. Well, basically, I could be wrong, but my thought is get to level 80 as fast as you can. So they talk about the gear before level 80 not being as good. Once you're at level 80, they give you a minimum item rating. So it sounds like the first thing you're going to want to do is rush to level 80. And then you're going to want to look at saying, well, what currency do I want to get for the upgrade path once I get to that item rating? So I'm not 100% sure if you can upgrade flashpoint gear into operation gear or because there is that cap. They're not clear on that. That's something that I don't know yet. So we'll have to wait and see a little bit for more details to figure out if you can just grind up gear on flashpoints until you hit the cap and then move to the next difficulty up. So I like the idea that maybe it might be worth grinding master flashpoints for the more experienced players because you go straight to 326 is what they're currently saying instead of 324. But the interesting thing too is that Conquest is also going to let you get to that level. So, and I'm not sure if you can end up mixing and matching stuff, if you can mix your Conquest upgrading with your Flashpoint upgrading with your operations, this could be quite good in terms of being able to power level your gear up by doing, having Conquest boosting while you're doing Flashpoints and then get into operations as well. But yeah, I'm curious to see. It's really going to depend on if that gear is interchangeable. I kind of looking like it's not, kind of sounding like it's not, but I could be misreading it. So yeah, basically, biggest thing I think is get yourself to level 80 when the new expansion drops, and then focus on uh, figuring out, and we'll know more details as the patch is closer to being out, but then focus on figuring out, if I max out my flashpoint item rating, can I use that momentum when I get into the operation item rating, which is even higher? Or is it kind of a waste to grind flashpoints if my gear can do the operations, which are going to reward me with higher level gear in the end? So hopefully you enjoyed that 20 minutes of me talking about a post that probably only takes 7 to 10 minutes to read, and giving you my thoughts on some of the big impacts it's going to have on 7.0. Now let's talk about my personal opinion about that, now that we've gone over kind of the more factual stuff. My personal opinion is a little bit still undecided because there's a few things I want to know first. First, I'd want to know, is the gear locked in 100% for certain? When it's flashpoint gear, it's locked in. You can never go upgrade it once you start doing operations, and you have to start a new set of gear. I'd really like to know that. Can you mix and match these currencies? I've seen some pictures of some, upgrading takes multiple currencies and this and that on the PTS. So yeah, it kind of looks like it. So if that's the case, I'm going to be pretty happy. I do like the idea that they have of saying that as you do harder content, you're going to get better item rating gear. I really like the fact that you can't get max item rating gear just by spamming Hammer Station. I'm not 100% convinced about the whole weekly thing that they're going to be doing. I think that there's some good in that because I love having a little bit more variety in my gameplay. I'm not the type of player who wants to spam Hammer Station all day long just because it's the fastest one. I like having variety. I don't like having variety when you look at everything that's available for the week and you're like, I hate all of this. So again, there's always some downsides to that, but overall, I think it's going to be a positive thing that will create more variety for players playing, even if it does slow us down a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of the potential that grinding flashpoints will not allow you to get your item rating up as quickly. We'll have to see how the costs work out as to if the 3 guaranteed upgrade thing really does limit you once you get into the more having to get the currency to upgrade. Because really, I expect to get at least one item a rating upgrade out of across all my gear every time I run a flashpoint, because that's how it was in 6.0. So I'd love to see that again. Otherwise, I'll be a little disappointed if they slow down the gearing progression and they try and limit you so that it's harder to grind yourself up if you have a week where you just want to play a whole bunch and try and get caught up or whatever. Although it can help players prevent burnout, I doubt it will. It'll probably just make them grind even harder, which is a bit unfortunate. I'm not totally liking the whole way that they're going to keep increasing the power rating as the next patches come out, while not actually doing anything to make the content harder. Whatever. It's their choice. I don't think it's a horrible choice. For me personally, I'm just kind of like, as an end game oriented player, I think it's kind of dumb. I think it's a little bit janky, a little bit silly. We'll see what the difficulty of stuff is when it comes out, how much they change stuff, but initially I don't think it makes a big deal. It doesn't really matter to me right now. I'm going to get the gear and see how hard the content is to do in 7.0, right? That's the general idea. Yeah, I'm a little bit annoyed about the idea with having all these currencies to play around with, but who knows? I'm sure that once you start doing the system, it won't feel that hard anymore. It'll seem pretty reasonable once you get into it. So I'm not expecting it to be a challenge to get used to. I'm not expecting it to be something that's hard that I'm like, oh, hey, I still can't understand this after working on my gear upgrading for this long. So overall, I think it's probably going to end up being a system that's fairly easy to follow, fairly easy to work with. But for a player who doesn't play very often, I could definitely see this becoming a challenging thing for them to work with, and them not really liking that every time they log in, they have to try and remember what all these gear currencies are and what pieces they're trying to farm. So overall, I am not super upset with what I've seen so far for 7.0 gearing. I think that in general, it won't feel too much different from 6.0. I think that as long as we aren't locked out of boosting our other characters, it'll feel very similar in a lot of ways. And I would think that, this currency for upgrading, it's probably going to be legacy wide currency, so that will probably help you upgrade. I would I would prefer to see a system where I can just trade my max item gear like we could in 6.0 to make sure that item rating drops us that high. Not really sure that's what's going to happen. It's a bit unclear to me exactly. So, yeah, if they say that each character has to upgrade their own gear from a certain point, I'd be a bit annoyed. But it's looking like we won't necessarily have to completely restart each character from a low level and boost them up, but it looks like it might not be quite as easy as 6.0, where once you get a character to max level, you just transfer a bunch of legacy gear and then boom, they're at max item rating and you can get all the stuff that you want, put it in, and they're done. They do talk about, though, having the vendor at some point for all the moddable gear for the min-maxing. So I think overall, this is going to feel very similar while having a lot of different little things that make it complex and reward you differently depending on your playstyle. So yeah, I'm definitely not afraid of the changes, and I'm definitely not saying, oh, I'm mad at them about this. There's a few little weird things in here, but overall, I'm like, yeah, this sounds like something that I'll just keep playing, and I won't find it to have gone in the wrong direction. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day.